It is March 2026. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow throat where roughly 20% of the world's oil flows, has turned into a killing zone. Iranian fast attack boats swarm like angry hornets. Mines drift in the current. Anti-ship missiles flash from the shoreline. The world holds its breath. And then, out of the haze, comes a sound that has terrified enemies for half a century. Not a drone, not an F-35 ghosting across the sky, not a billion-dollar stealth fighter. It is the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, the aircraft the U.S. Air Force tried to retire again and again and again, now flying straight into hell over the Strait of Hormuz and tearing Iranian fast attack craft apart. In Operation Epic Fury, the A-10 did not just show up. It became one of the most talked about weapons in the fight. At a Pentagon briefing, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane said it plainly. The A-10 Warthog is now in the fight across the southern flank and is hunting and killing fast attack watercraft in the Strait of Hormuz. That is not fan fiction. That is the top U.S. military officer saying the Warthog is back in business. And the numbers were brutal. Official Pentagon material listed more than 120 Iranian vessels damaged or destroyed. Some reporting tied that to dozens of mine-laying craft put out of action. Shipping lanes that could have stayed blocked for months were being forced open in weeks, while the headlines chased the F-35 and the B-2. The ugly, slow, armored hog was down at wave-top height doing the dirty work. This is not nostalgia. This is what happens when an old war machine meets the exact battlefield it was built for. So why did the A-10 hit so hard in Hormuz? Why did a 1970s attack jet suddenly look like the perfect answer to a 2026 maritime crisis? Because this was not luck. This was engineering genius, meeting the perfect battlefield with the perfect tactics at exactly the right moment. First, survivability. The A-10 was built to come home broken. It was designed to fly with systems shot up, with damage that would end the mission for other aircraft. In Hormuz, Iranian defenses were still dangerous. Manpads, shore-based missiles, small arms fire from speedboats. But the Warthog was made for that kind of punishment. Its titanium bathtub armor weighs over 1,200 pounds and protects the pilot and key systems. Its twin TF-34 engines are mounted high and aft, reducing exposure to ground fire. Its flight controls are backed up with redundant hydraulics and even mechanical reversion. This thing was engineered to keep flying after losing major systems. That matters, because survivability let A-10 pilots stay low, stay slow, stay in the fight. When other aircraft had to stay high and fast, the Hog could keep hunting where the danger lived. Second, the gun. The GAU-8 Avenger. The reason the Warthog became a legend in the first place. Forget million-dollar missiles for a second. The A-10's 7-barrel 30mm cannon fires about 3,900 rounds per minute. That is roughly 65 rounds every second. One squeeze of the trigger, and a thin-skinned patrol boat is suddenly fighting physics, fire, and shredded metal. In the tight waters of Hormuz, that matters. These were not giant capital ships. These were small, fast, agile targets hugging the waves. That is exactly where the gun becomes terrifying. Precision-guided bombs are powerful, but against a swarm in close quarters, response time is everything. The GAU-8 is instant, violent, cheap compared with high-end standoff weapons, and psychologically, nothing sounds like it. That sound alone carries a reputation built over decades of war. Third, loiter time. Modern fighters are fast. They scream through the battle space. They strike. Then they are gone. The A-10 does something different. It hangs around. It cruises at roughly 300 knots. It can orbit a fight for extended periods. It can operate low, slow, and close to the action. In Hormuz, that turned the Warthog into persistent overwatch. It could stalk, watch, wait, then pounce the moment a new swarm appeared. That persistence made it deadly. While faster jets often had to cycle out to refuel or rearm, the A-10 could remain the eyes and teeth of the operation. Fourth, the A-10C upgrades, because this was not just an old brute with a big gun. This was an old brute turned into a digital hunter. The A-10C modernization added sniper and lightning targeting pods, GPS-guided weapons, helmet-mounted queuing, and a glass cockpit built for modern battle management. That meant pilots were not just spotting boats with their eyeballs. They were tracking them with sensors, designating targets, sharing coordinates, feeding the wider battle network in real time. The Warthog was not fighting alone, it was plugged into a kill chain, and that made an old aircraft far more dangerous than its age suggested. Fifth, the battlefield itself. This part is crucial. The A-10 is not a stealth aircraft. It is not built to charge into a fully intact high-end air defense network and pretend those threats do not exist. But by the time the Warthogs were heavily involved, coalition strikes had already degraded major elements of Iran's air defense picture. That changed everything. Radar sites had been hit. Air defense systems had been suppressed. The battle space was still dangerous, but it was no longer untouched. And once that happened, the very aircraft critics said could not survive contested airspace suddenly became the perfect predator in the airspace that had already been cracked open. That is the irony. The A-10 was not built to win the first hour of the war. It was built to dominate once the door had been kicked in. Sixth, pilot skill. Because hardware alone does not create a legend. People do. Many A-10 pilots came into this fight with years of combat experience from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. They understood low-altitude flying. They understood time on target. They understood how to think inside a fast-moving kill box. These were not rookies flying a museum piece. These were experienced attack pilots in a machine built for close violence. They flew low, used terrain and coastline for masking, timed attacks with joint assets, and turned old-school strafing runs into a modern maritime kill tactic. That combination of machine and pilot made the difference. Now let's talk tactics, because this is where the Warthog stopped being iconic and became lethal. The mission was brutally simple: persistent hunter-killer operations against Iran's swarm tactics, fast attack craft, speedboats, mine layers, small mobile threats trying to choke the strait. The A-10s reportedly flew low over the water, often between roughly 50 and 200 feet above the waves, at speeds around 250 to 300 knots, low enough to stay masked, fast enough to close, slow enough to see and react. That profile let them use wave tops and coastline for concealment while staying ready to strike almost instantly. Loiter time could stretch for hours, especially with aerial refueling support from KC-135 and KC-46 tankers. That turned each A-10 into a roaming executioner over a patch of sea. Target acquisition relied on modern sensors, sniper advanced targeting pods, litening pods, helmet queuing, Link 16 data sharing. That meant the pilot was not guessing. The aircraft could detect, identify, track, and hand off targets while staying tied into a larger coalition network. E-2D Hawkeyes, MQ-9 Reapers, Navy ships, other joint assets. The A-10 could be both shooter and spotter. That is what made the kill chain feel seamless. And when the moment came, the attack was textbook. The Warthogs would orbit outside the swarm, then dive in to isolate one target at a time, break the pack, kill the edge boat, then the next, then the next. Do not let the swarm behave like a swarm. For gun runs, the passes could be level or shallow dives, 1 to 2 second bursts, 30mm rounds tearing through hulls, engines, fuel, and exposed crew positions. Then silence, then fire, then wreckage. For larger or more dangerous targets, the A-10 could also bring AGM-65 Mavericks, laser-guided rockets like APKWS, bombs, and other ordnance on up to 11 hardpoints. That flexibility mattered. The gun handled the close kill. Precision weapons handled standoff shots and tougher targets. Cheap when possible, precise when necessary. That is how you wear down a fleet of small attackers without wasting premium munitions on every boat in the water. Tough fight. Put it all together. Armor, gun, loiter time, modern sensors, a partially degraded enemy air defense picture, and veteran pilots flying aggressive tactics. And the result was a perfect storm. A 1970s attack aircraft turning the Strait of Hormuz from an Iranian pressure point into a graveyard for fast attack craft. Now look at the machine itself. The numbers explain why this aircraft still refuses to die. Length, 53 feet, 4 inches. Wingspan, 57 feet, 6 inches. Maximum takeoff weight, more than 51,000 pounds. Power plant, 2 General Electric TF34 turbofans, each producing roughly 9,065 pounds of thrust. Top speed, about 439 miles per hour. Slow? Yes, and that is exactly the point, because that slow speed is part of what makes the A-10 deadly in close work. It gives pilots time to see, time to aim, time to re-attack, and time to own the fight at low altitude. Combat radius is often cited at around 290 miles without refueling, and much more with tanker support. Service ceiling is around 45,000 feet. But the truth is, the A-10 does its best work down low, where the enemy can hear it, where the enemy can see it, where the enemy realizes too late what is coming. And at the center of it all is the Ju-8A Avenger, the gun that made the legend. It carries roughly 1,174 rounds of 30mm ammunition. Its muzzle velocity is over 3,500 feet per second. This cannon was designed to rip apart armor. A fiberglass or lightly built speedboat does not stand much of a chance. And the A-10 can carry a huge mix of weapons besides the gun: Mavericks, Sidewinders, JDAMs, rockets, guided munitions, and more. But in Hormuz, the gun was still the star of the story. And then there is the armor, the titanium bathtub. The detail every A-10 fan loves for a reason. It protects the pilot and critical systems from severe damage. The aircraft also uses redundant systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and fire suppression features designed to keep it alive when lesser aircraft would be done. This jet was built from day one to survive the kind of close-range punishment that comes with ugly, dirty, low-level combat. That is why it still matters. The Warthog's story goes back decades. Its roots are tied to lessons learned from Vietnam, when the old A-1 Skyraider showed the value of persistent close support, but also the need for something purpose-built and more survivable. The Air Force wanted a true close air support monster. Fairchild Republic won the AX competition in the early 1970s. The A-10 first flew in May 1972. It entered service in the 1970s. It was built to kill Soviet armor on the plains of Europe. Instead, it ended up proving itself in war after war: Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria. Again and again, people tried to write it off. Again and again, it came back. And by 2026, even after repeated retirement pushes, it was still finding new ways to matter. Now let's be honest, the A-10 does have weaknesses. It is subsonic. It is not stealthy. In a high-end war against fully intact peer air defenses, it would need support and protection. It is also expensive to keep flying because of age and sustainment demands. Those criticisms are real. But so is this. When the fight turns ugly, close, and persistent, the Warthog still offers something many modern aircraft do not: presence, durability, time on station, and terrifying close-range lethality. That combination is rare. The A-10 did not just succeed in the Strait of Hormuz. It reminded the world of something modern war keeps relearning. The most expensive platform is not always the one that owns the battlefield. Sometimes the machine that matters most is the one that can stay. Take hits, see the target, and keep firing. Sometimes the ugliest aircraft in the sky is the one the enemy fears most. This is bigger than one airplane. This is a story about battlefield fit, about old designs that were so brutally right, they outlived the people who tried to kill them. About a war machine built in the 1970s, still finding ways to dominate in 2026. And after Hormuz, the retirement talk around the Warthog sounded a lot quieter. So the next time you hear that unmistakable sound, remember this: the old hog is still here, still hunting, still killing, still proving that in the right fight, it is one of the most dangerous aircraft ever built. If this fired you up, hit like, subscribe, and share this with every defense nerd you know. Because legends like the A-10 are not supposed to fade quietly. They are supposed to roar. And over the Strait of Hormuz in 2026, the Warthog roared again.